Thank you all for coming. Thanks particularly to the people with your cameras on. I really appreciate that. That gives me a little bit of feedback, which I always like and appreciate when I'm giving a talk. I think there's an Apple event, something about a phone going on today. So I also appreciate you, coming to this rather than the phone event. That's nice. Right. So I was looking through meetup.com, which is how you probably came here, a little while ago, and I noticed that almost all of the talks are about good ideas. Most of the tech talks are about good ideas. Here is why you should use this particular platform, this particular library, this particular approach to solving a problem, right? Which makes sense, right? You're taking time out of your day to come and watch a talk. You want to get something useful out of it, some useful advice that you can apply to your next project, that you can apply in your team today. Some talks are about bad ideas, though, because bad ideas are really interesting as well. We learn from failure, right? Teams telling you how they screwed up, how they made mistakes, what they learned from them, and basically what you should not do in the future, which is also a really interesting and I think valuable kind of talk format. This talk is not about either of those types of ideas. This talk is about some bad ideas that I think you should try anyway. And I want to spend a bit of time kind of exploring the ideas and why I think you should give them a shot and just see what happens. So let's just dive right in. Before I do that, can I just get a show of hands? I'm assuming here most people are on a team, maybe a development team of some sort. Can I just get a show of hands? Just kind of wave your hands at the screen if you currently have a PO, if you currently have a product owner in your team. I see several waving hands. That's great. Yes. Is anyone here actually a product owner? Just wave your hands if you're a product owner. I don't. Oh, I saw one hand. Oh, okay, that's interesting. So that's interesting because my first bad idea is that you should get rid of your PO. I see the one PO who I saw put their hands up is laughing. That's good. That's a good start. Okay, I appreciate that. So this is a bad idea, right? If I was to go into most teams with a PO, with a product owner, and just take them out overnight, that would probably be a disaster. POs do a lot of useful things. They help the team. They're an important part of the team. And if I just rip someone out of the team, it's probably going to lead to some bad things. Rather than just saying, oh, this would be terrible, I want to explore why. I want to really understand what sort of pain would this cause. So to do that, I think we need to understand what a PO does. So to answer that question, I went to my least favorite website, scrum.org, to try and find the answer. And they actually have quite a good article on here. It's got on the role of a PO. What does a PO do? And one of the first lines in that article is, a product owner is responsible for maximizing the value of the product. I actually think this is a really good description. This is a really good line. There's two really important points in here, right? The first word is responsible. Responsible doesn't mean they do everything. It means the buck stops with them. It means they are the ultimate responsible person. The other point here is this maximizing of value. So if you think about it, every single day when we are working on our product, on our whatever it is we're building, we have choices. Do we build feature X or feature Y? Do we invest in performance? Do we invest in paying down our tech debt? We always have choices. The product owner is responsible for making the choices that maximize the value of the product. This is a nice, really concise description of what a product owner does, but this is really more the why. What is their reason for being, unless the how? What are the details here? So I scrolled down this article and I found the next line, which is, the product owner is the sole person responsible for managing the product backlog. So again, we have this word responsible here, which means, again, it doesn't mean they do all of this, but when it comes to the product backlog, when it comes to your product backlog, whether this is in Jira or Trello, or to be honest, it's probably Jira. They don't necessarily add all of the cards. They don't necessarily do all of the work. They probably pair with members of the team. They probably delegate some of this work, but they are ultimately responsible for what goes in there and how it's prioritized. Because it's those things that are going to maximize, that allow us to maximize the value of the product. Now, I don't know about you, but that description sounds incredibly boring to me. Like if I saw a job description, which was your entire job is to manage Jira, it's just like manage a product backlog. That sounds incredibly depressing and sad. I don't want to do that. I would not apply for that job. But I do like this idea of kind of maximizing the value of a product. So let me just, I don't think this managing the product backlog really captures what a product owner does. So feel free to just shout out now. What else does a product owner do when they're not messing around in Jira? What else do they do? You can just shout out if you have an answer here. I also have obviously some answers myself, so I can. If you're thinking about value, if you're thinking about maximizing, oh, okay, I saw one answer there. I won't say that out loud. But yeah, they do filter problems that roll downhill, shall we say? They do protect the team from a lot of pain. They also, if their job is to maximize value, value is only relative to someone. Value is relative to the user, which means they need to understand the user. They need to get out there. They are probably interviewing, researching, working with, talking with the users. Oh, we got another answer here. They build a bridge between business requirements and the tech world. Yes, they are trying to bridge two worlds here, two different perspectives. They do a lot of really, really useful things. Understanding users. Single pigeon, yeah, they translate between worlds, both the business and the tech world, but also the end users as well. So the business stakeholders, but also the end users of your product, of the thing you're building. So if I was to take this person out of your team, you would lose that. You would lose this translator between worlds. You would lose this person with a connection to the users, to the business stakeholders. That would be really bad. This is why this is a bad idea. And most teams, if you were to just remove your PO tomorrow, would probably end in disaster. But I want to kind of reframe this. I want to ask, instead of how bad would it be, I want to ask, what would we need to do to make this work? If I was to take away your PO and it not be a disaster, what needs to be true for that to happen? How do we make this a success? So I'm going to say the first thing we need to do is we need everyone in the team to understand the user. The PO is often seen as the translator, as the person who translates this end user's needs into work items. They're the person who works with the user and then translates to this to features, the things the team can build. If the PO isn't there, the team needs to understand the user so they can understand whether or not they're building the right thing. Everyone needs to understand, everyone needs to work with the user. So you might have heard there's an agile manifesto that you might have heard of. There's a line in that which is customer collaboration over contract negotiation. It just says customer collaboration. It does not say customer collaboration through the PO. It just says customer collaboration. What we're doing here is we are forcing everyone to collaborate with a customer. Not just the end user, but also the business stakeholders. Because we're working in a larger organization very often, we need to understand how our product fits into the business, or who our stakeholders are, what success means for the business and how we achieve that. So we need to understand the user and our internal stakeholders. These two things are really, really hard to do. Really, really hard to do. You need to change how the team thinks about itself. We can't just say things like, oh, I'm just a developer, or I'm just a QA. I just write tests, or I just write code. We actually need to understand that we are now responsible for understanding the user and delivering value. This requires a change in mindset of the entire team. This is really hard to do, just these 2 points. But more than that, we need to change how the team fits into the organization around it. The team needs to be empowered to make changes. The team needs to be empowered to make choices. It needs to be an autonomous team. See, if the team says, we are going to spend the next week working on tech debt, or we are going to spend the next 2 weeks improving the performance of our products, and someone in the business says, no, 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 you need to go work on this feature instead, you haven't removed your PO, you've just moved them somewhere else, somewhere further away that you have less contact with. You've made the situation worse. So the team needs to be empowered to make choices. The team needs to be empowered to make decisions. Kent Beck has a great quote, which is, power without accountability is just a vacation. The team needs to be accountable as well. The team needs to understand that they are now responsible for delivering this value to the user. They are not, you can't be a code monkey in this world. You can't be, my job is to write code. My job is to write this feature that someone gives me. You need to understand that the position, the role of the team changes here. The first 2 points here is the team changing how it thinks about itself. And the second 2 points are the organization, the business changing how it interacts and understands the team. This is really, really hard to do. These are huge changes for the business, for the organization, and for the team. It requires everyone in the team, everyone in the organization taking on new mindsets and new skills. Every developer needs product skills now. Every developer, every member of the team needs a whole new set of skills that they did not need before. This is really, really hard to do. Thing is, this looks like a really good team to me, okay? If you describe to me, hey, I have a team where everyone understands the user, everyone has contact with the stakeholders and the users, the team is empowered, they're autonomous and they're accountable, that to me sounds like a fantastic team. So look, I don't think you should remove your PO, okay? That will probably not end well, right? I think there's a lot of value in having a PO and having someone with a product mindset, someone with a vision, someone who is able to focus time on thinking strategically, thinking about stakeholder management. I think that's a really useful thing to do, but I think you should act as if you were going to get rid of your PO next month, because it's going to force you to do these things. It's going to force you to understand the user better. It's going to force you to invest and build accountability and autonomy in the team. Removing your PO is a bad idea, but I think you should try it anyway because it will push you in a good direction. So that's the first of the bad ideas. Get rid of your PO. The next bad idea is possibly even more controversial. I'm going to need to explain this one. It's full continuous deployment. I don't really think this is a bad idea. I actually think this is kind of a good idea, but I need to explain why I put it on this list. There's a little bit of context here. So I'm going to need to explain some terms. And I want to think about things in terms of how does your code get from your laptop to production? How does your code get from laptop to production? So most of you, I would assume, write code on a laptop. That's cool. I'm on a laptop right now. At some point, you are going to push that code to source control. I should really label this, SCM, source control management, but let's be honest, it's Git. At some point after that, That code is going to be built and it's going to be deployed to a pre-production environment, a staging environment, somewhere where there are no users, somewhere where there are no customers. And then finally, your code is going to be pushed to production. This is where the customers live. This is where value is delivered, okay? So this is what we would call a path to production. I've kept this really, really generic because everyone's path to production is very, very different, okay? You almost certainly have automation around here. You almost certainly have automated builds, automated tests. You may well have more environments than this. I've just put one pre-production environment. Lots and lots of things that happen along this pathway. So I kept this just as generic as possible for the purposes of this, this discussion. So I'm going to draw the first controversial arrow on this diagram. And I'm going to say this here is the realm of continuous integration, right? Continuous integration is a really, really important idea. It's actually really simple to define. There's a really simple 3-step test for continuous integration, right? It's invented by Jez Humble. This is the continuous integration certification. So to do continuous integration, you need to do 3 things. First thing, you need to merge to master. You need to push your code, integrate it with master, with your main line, with the trunk of your source control in Git at least once a day. If you do that, you've passed the first test. And you get a show of hands. Who does this? You merge to master at least once a day. Cool. See some hands going up. Nice. Second test for continuous integration is every time you do that, it triggers an automated build and test. This is what we would typically call a pipeline, a build pipeline. You might call this your CI pipeline. So who has that? Who has a CI pipeline? Again, I see some hands, lovely. And finally, and this is the important one, anytime that fails, anytime there is a failure, a build or a test failure, you fix it really quickly. You fix it in about 10 minutes, very, very quickly. Who is that true for? Wave your hands. Nice, that's good news. More and more people are doing this. It's nice, it's really nice. Those details are important though, okay? It has to be to mainline. It has to be to your master branch, and whatever you call that. If you just integrate with a feature branch, you're not integrating, okay? The integration comes later when you merge to master. What you're doing there is just delayed integration, not continuous integration. So the core of continuous integration is you integrate daily, and that always triggers a feedback cycle. That's it. That's the core of continuous integration. Next definition here is continuous delivery. Continuous delivery goes a little bit further. Continuous delivery makes it so that your code, the product, the thing you're building is always in a deliverable state, is always able to be deployed, able to be released to the customer. There's a lot of ways of describing continuous delivery. The one I really like, the one that really sticks with me is continuous delivery makes releasing a business decision. That's it. That's the whole definition. That's the whole definition of continuous delivery. It makes releasing a business decision, not a technical decision. So I used to work in a big company. You can figure out this from seeing my LinkedIn. It's not hard to find out. I used to work for a very big company. In a very big department, very big team, hundreds of people in this department. And one day, one of our competitors, one of our major competitors, released their product, released a competitor to our product. And our product manager, our big project manager, literally walked onto the sort of office floor and said, "Hey, look, our competitors have just released something. Can we release? Because we have features, we're working on features, can we release them?" And all of the team leads kind of looked at themselves and said, No, no, you can't. No, there's a lot of work to release this, okay? There was a huge amount of manual integration to do to build the product as a whole. It was about a dozen teams, huge product. It's going to be lots and lots of work to integrate it. It's going to be at least a couple of weeks for installation testing, for final kind of manual verification testing. This is a lot of work. You cannot release right now. This is going to take time. Releasing in that company, in that context, was a technical decision. The business wanted to release, the development teams said no. That was not a continuous delivery project. The most recent team I worked on, we showcase our features to our product owner. We have a product owner on our staging environment. And if our product owner says, yes, that looks great, I like that, can you release it? The answer is always yes. It's literally, we go into our CI tool, we press one button, and it deploys to production. Releasing is a business decision. That was a continuous delivery project, a continuous delivery product. That's the core of it. It makes releasing a business decision. The final definition up here is continuous deployment. This is the one that I labeled as a bad idea, which I need to explain. So continuous deployment is where every single commit goes to production. If it passes the tests, if it gets through our pipeline, it goes to production. That's it. That's the whole definition of continuous deployment. You can do continuous delivery with or without continuous deployment. You can mix and match. There's a lot of ways of doing both of these, but those are the definitions here. So here's the thing. Here's why I put this on the list. If you join a team and they're not doing any of these, helping a team get to doing continuous integration is one of the most valuable things you can do for the team. Gives fast feedback, small, low-risk changes. It's building in quality. All of the things that go into continuous integration are incredibly useful for the team. They improve the team's experience vastly. Delivers no value to the business, delivers no value to the user, okay? Because perfectly tested code, a perfect product sitting in source control or sitting in a staging environment delivers zero value. The users live here, the users live in production, okay? So continuous integration is incredibly useful to the team. I recommend every team does this. Continuous integration is a good idea and you should do it. Continuous delivery is the most valuable thing you can do for the business and for the user. It makes it so that your code is always releasable. It makes it so that changes can get to the user as fast as is humanly possible. Continuous delivery is one of the most valuable things you can do for the business. You put the control of releasing into the hands of the business. Continuous integration and continuous delivery are two very good ideas. Continuous deployment is also a good idea. You get some benefits from continuous deployment. If every single commit goes to production, you get some benefits. You really do. It ensures that the code running in production is more up to date. You're less likely to have out-of-date dependencies, less likely to have security vulnerabilities. Continuous deployment is really good. But if you're doing continuous integration and continuous delivery, if you're already doing those, if you're already releasing and deploying to production regularly, multiple times a week even, which is entirely possible with just these two, the benefits are fairly marginal. Continuous integration, incredibly valuable. Continuous delivery, incredibly valuable. Continuous deployment, good, but fairly marginal value compared to the other two. That's why I put it on this list. Not because it's a bad idea, just because it's a fairly marginal benefit compared to the others. But it's also a lot harder. because you lose some things here. So if every single commit goes to production, you don't have a staging environment, or you don't get to manually check things before you deploy to stage, before you deploy to production. So again, I want to ask the question, what would we need to make this work? What would we need to do to successfully do continuous deployment? First of all, you're going to need feature toggles. Feature toggles allow us to separate deploying from releasing. They allow us to hide incomplete features, incomplete work, but still deploy to production, get our code in front of users, even if part of that functionality is hidden. Specifically release toggles I'm talking about here. Feature toggles are really, really useful. You should be using feature toggles even if you're just doing continuous delivery, but they are absolutely mandatory if you're doing continuous deployment. You're going to need really, really high confidence in your automation. Because with continuous deployment, every single commit, every single change goes to production if it passes your pipeline, if it passes through your automation, which means your automation is what decides whether or not code makes it in front of a user. You need to have really high confidence in that automation. You don't get a manual set of eyes just to check whether or not everything's okay. With continuous deployment, you need to really, really trust your automated pipeline, your deployment pipeline. But it's not enough just to trust it now. You need to know it's going to stay good in the future, which means you need a culture of quality. Every single person in your team needs to understand that it is their responsibility to build in quality. You can't just test this later. This isn't like, oh, we'll do it later. We'll have a test phase. We'll have a QA phase later on in the process. That's not how that works. It doesn't work if you're doing continuous deployment. You need to understand that you don't write code if you don't have a test for it. You need a culture of quality. Otherwise, this is going to fail. But sometimes things are going to fail. We have unknown unknowns. Some things are going to make it through your net. Some things are going to make it through your automation. So you need to invest in monitoring and observability. So if something goes wrong, you need to know about it. You need automated checks. You need some way of figuring out if you broke something. And you need a way of fixing it really, really quickly. Because every commit is going to production, you need a way of fixing it quickly. So the amount of time between your laptop and production needs to be as short as possible. You might have automated rollbacks, you might have a fix forward policy. The details are up to you, but you need to be able to fix problems quickly if you are working with continuous deployment. All of these things are really hard, but they're worth it, right? Even if you're not going to do full continuous deployment, you should be investing in these things. There are situations where continuous deployment isn't that valuable, doesn't add a huge amount of extra value, only marginal value. And there are situations where it's impossible, possibly in highly regulated environments that require some manual sign-off. But you should be acting as if you are going to do full continuous deployment. I say this as someone who has done full continuous deployment in the last couple of projects I've worked on. It's absolutely possible. It is a good thing. Even if you're not doing it, you should be working as if you are, because these are good, positive improvements to your system. Right, okay. So that's the second bad idea. Third bad idea is I think you should get rid of all of your non-production environments. So remember this path to production from earlier. I said you have your production environment. This is where your users, your paying customers, your clients, your customers live. You probably also have a non-production environment. at least one. Can I get a show of hands? Who has one non-production environment? Maybe a pre-prod, a staging environment. Does anyone have one? I see a couple of hands up there. Nice. Does anyone have two? Who has two pre-production environments? A couple of hands. Three. More hands. Four or more. Who has four or more? Loads. Wow. My experience has been about three. It seems to be the industry average for non-production environments, but I have seen more. They can definitely grow. See, here's the thing. A lot of you have a lot of non-production environments. Maybe you call them staging, maybe it's a CI environment, a QA environment, a test environment, an integration environment, whatever you label it. And they're sitting there and they're costing you money, right? They're costing you money. You are paying for those servers and you don't have users on them. You don't have paying customers on those servers, but you're paying for them, which is kind of interesting, right? So why don't we get rid of them? Why don't we just get rid of all of your non-production environments? So first up, it's a really, really bad idea to make changes to your path to production to save a few dollars, to save a few euros. That's a terrible, terrible reason to change your path to production. Your path to production is how your team delivers value. It is as important as the product you are building, right? Don't make changes just to save a little bit of money, right? Bad idea. If you get rid of these environments, you're losing something, right? What do you do on these environments? Who here has an environment that is called test, like a test environment or a QA environment? Who has something like that? Yeah, I see a few hands up. I'm guessing you run tests on that. I mean, it's kind of in the name, right? I'm assuming you run tests on the test environment, right? These environments have a purpose. Integration environments, they're really common. They test integration points, typically with other teams. You might have a load test environment where you throw loads and loads of load at the servers. But see, here's the thing. I think we make a mistake. I think we really commonly make a mistake when we talk about paths to production, when we talk about our pipelines, when we talk about these environments. We mix up the environments and the actual actions we're doing on these environments, okay? We say, oh, we have a test environment. That's where we run the tests. We have an integration environment. That's where we test integration. This is software. It's not artisanal vodka. It does not need to filter through four aged servers in order to deliver value. That is not how software works, okay? Think about what this path to production means. What is the purpose of this path to production? What is the purpose of this pipeline? The point of it is to build confidence. Code on my laptop, I don't trust, okay? If you're anything like me, you've written code this week and it was really, really bad, okay? I don't trust code that I write. When I get to production, I want to have confidence in that code. So what we do is every step in this path to production, every step in this pipeline, we do things to build confidence. I run unit tests to build confidence. I run end-to-end tests to build confidence. I run my integration tests to build confidence. I run load tests to build confidence. The point of a pipeline is to build confidence in the code that I am pushing. This has nothing to do with the servers. They're a distraction, right? We need to focus on what it is we are doing and why we're doing it, not on the servers. If we focus on the servers, we're focusing on the details, right? The how are we doing this, not the why. But this is still really hard to do. Taking away all of your environments means you need to change how your pipeline works. It means you need to change how your system works. What sorts of changes do we need to make? How do we make this work? So first of all, I think you're going to need all of the things from the previous entry. You're going to need all those things that we had in the continuous deployment entry. You're going to need monitoring, observability, feature flags. You need ways of controlling the code in production. You need all of those things, and you need a little bit more. I think you're going to need disposable environments. and by extension, probably infrastructure as code as well. Fully disposable environments. We run things like unit tests because they run in isolation. We get nice, fast feedback. We run in isolation without side effects, right? Thing is, some of the changes we make are by definition side effects, particularly infrastructure code. The only way to run this is to create a side effect. The only way to test this is to create a side effect. So we need some way of validating that in a disposable environment. I see lots of teams with infrastructure as code, fully disposable environments, just spin up an entire environment in a second. I see that a bit less so. This is hard to do, but you get a lot of benefits from this. You're probably also going to want to start investing in canary releases. Canary releases are when you don't release to everyone all at one go. You start to release to a small cohort of your users, bit by bit. Facebook is famous for doing this, okay? So Facebook, when they build a new feature, first of all, they test it on their Facebook employees. Then they release it to 0.1% of their users. Then they release it to 1% of their users. Then they release it to 10% of their users. And then finally, they inflict it on all of us. Because they have such a big environment, they can't just, it is too much of a risk to roll out a change to everyone all at once. So they test in production. They test on their real users. So they need a way of dynamically changing how their environment is configured. This is effectively a special case of feature toggles, if you want to get kind of technical. This is a really nice thing to have. One of the main reasons that I see people pushing back against testing in production, which you have to do here, which is effectively what canary releases is. One of the main reasons I see people pushing back against this sort of thing and saying, no, we need a test environment, is because of test data. If I'm running automated tests, I probably need some test data in that environment. And if it's in production, well, now I have test data and customer data right next to them, right next to each other. And that's very often hard to manage. This is why I think a lot of people push back against it. So you need really good test data management. You need some way of managing that data so it does not negatively impact users. So you can get the benefits of test data in production without impacting users. So look, here's the thing. You'll save a bit of money if you get rid of all of your non-production environments. It's nice to do, I think. I think it's a positive thing. I think it forces you to think in good ways. But ultimately, the reason I suggest you try this is because it forces you to do these things. Okay? Disposable environments and infrastructure as code, everyone agrees, good ideas, but very few people really need to do them. Canary releases and test data management, really, really huge quality of life improvements for the team, for any development team. But very few teams really need to do them. They can usually get away without them or with some very simple version of those. If you have only one environment, all of a sudden you're forced to do this. This acts as a positive pressure, as a forcing function on your team to follow good practices. And that's why I like this. That's why I think you should try to get rid of your environments, because it pushes you in the right direction. Final bad idea now. You might find this one interesting because my job title is actually, I'm a QA officially. And the final bad idea is that you should get rid of all of your end-to-end tests. So end-to-end tests. End-to-end tests are useful, right? They test the system as a whole. They set the system end-to-end, right? It's literally in the title. All tests serve a purpose. Unit tests test individual units of code. They build confidence that individual units of code are working. Integration tests test that integration points, the integration between modules of code and modules of the system are working properly. And end-to-end tests obviously test the system as a whole. You've probably seen this before. This is the sort of classic test automation pyramid. It's shaped like this because The general suggestion here is that you want to invest more time in your unit tests. You get faster feedback here. These are really cheap and easy to write and can build a lot of confidence very, very quickly in isolated environments without side effects. Lots and lots of benefits to unit tests, so you want to try and lean on them as much as possible. Quick, cheap, and reliable. Great. But that doesn't build all the confidence you need. So we also need integration tests. Integration tests are about testing the integration points between our systems. They're a little bit slower. It takes more time, more effort to set these up. So we want a little bit less of these. We want to try and, again, rely on the simpler tests as much as possible, the faster tests. It's about fast feedback. The reason end-to-end tests up here, the reason it's the tippy top of the pyramid, right? The reason there's a bit less here is because these are the slowest. These are the most expensive, the most difficult to maintain. If you're complaining about tests, if you've ever complained about a flaky test, about an unreliable test, it's almost certainly an end-to-end test. So why not just remove them? Why not just get rid of those tests? The problem here is if you get rid of your end-to-end tests, you're losing confidence. These build a very specific type of confidence in your system. They build confidence, right? Because look, tests, they're really, really fun to write. I love writing them, big fan, but this isn't why we have tests, right? We have tests in order to build confidence in our system. If I take away the tests, I lose that confidence. So how do I get it back? I would say we need to build confidence lower down. We need to push this confidence building lower down in this pyramid. How can I build the same confidence I build here down at the integration level? How can I make this work? I'm going to say the first answer is we need to think about our system in terms of contracts, in terms of interfaces. We need clearly defined contracts. This is how we need to think about how we define our system. Our system is not a microservice, a service, a server, whatever. It is a contract. We need to meet the contract or we are failing. And if we're thinking about things in that way, we probably need contract testing as well. Quite possibly, quite probably consumer-driven contract testing, which is where the teams who are consuming your API, consuming your service, write tests against it. Your users are defining what success means. What we're doing here is we're redefining, we're rethinking how we reason about systems, how we architect systems as well. We need to start making bigger changes, right? We need to start thinking about how can we loosely couple these systems. We need loose coupling. Ultimately, we need to be pushing towards self-contained services. As much as possible, we need services that own their entire value stream. This is really hard to do. This is fundamentally thinking about your services in a different way. Fundamentally thinking about your business, about your system as a whole in a different way. You will probably never get here. This is really, really hard to do. But I think it's worthwhile trying. It's worthwhile pushing as much confidence to different levels and rethinking about the system in this new way. Funnily enough, a team I joined about 2 years ago, when I joined, they did not have end-to-end tests. Not because of this, but just because they hadn't got round to it yet. They were a new team. And one of the first things I did was I helped them build up a set of end-to-end tests, a very small, simple set of end-to-end tests. The second thing I did is I said, we need to figure out how we're going to get rid of these. Okay, the first thing I did was build the end-to-end test. The second thing I did was, okay, how do we get rid of this? How do we build these things? And over the course of the next year or so, we did these things. We built up consumer-driven contracts. We tried to clearly define our contracts. We focused on re-architecting and loosely coupling our services so that we built resilience, so that we could test things in this way. So I think you should try this because it's going to push your team in a good direction. And that's the theme here, right? These 4 bad ideas. I don't think most teams should get rid of their PO. I don't think most teams are going to get a huge amount of value by firing their PO. I don't think most teams really need to do continuous deployment, while I am a big fan of it. I don't think most teams need to get rid of their non-production environments or need to obsess about removing their end-to-end tests. But I think if they try to do these things, they will move in a good direction. And that's the theme here. These things, these bad ideas, if you try them, can act as a positive forcing function on your team. So yeah, that's it. If you've ever worked with me, or if you've ever talked with anyone who has worked with me, you'll know that I have a lot of ideas, a lot of opinions, and most of them are bad. I've tried to limit them to sort of 4 today. I have a lot more. I'm not gonna talk about these today. I will hand over to questions at this point. Thank you all for listening. I appreciate you being here. Thank you for your very expressive faces. I do appreciate everyone sort of smiling, letting me know that my jokes worked or didn't work. That was good.
Thank you, Steve. So one question popped up just a minute ago from Telo. Any practical advice on how to implement functionality toggle?
Ooh, that is a really big topic. It depends, of course. It really does depend on your setup. Luckily, I actually did co-write an article with Paul Birding a few months ago on feature toggles. I don't know if Paul is in the audience. If he is, could he paste the article into the chat? There he is. He is actually in the audience. I can see him now. So we wrote an article on managing feature toggles in teams. This is really more about the sort of how you structure your team around feature toggles and your ways of working, rather than the sort of nitty-gritty code details. But I do really enjoy, well, obviously, like I wrote like me and Paul wrote the article, so obviously I think it's a good article. But that's maybe a good starting point. It also references the Martin Fowler article on feature toggles, which is a really nice, crunchy, detailed article. Oh, I saw only deploy on Fridays. Yeah, I think you should, because look, I really hate it when I see teams, when I see, like, there's this joke like, oh, never deploy on a Friday, right? What that means, when someone says that, when a team says that, it means they don't trust their ability to deploy code, right? It means they don't trust their ability to deliver value, which is kind of the whole point of you as a team, right? That to me is a huge red flag. So if you only deploy on Fridays, it kind of forces you to get better at this. It forces you to build confidence in your deployment infrastructure, which is a good thing. Again.
All right, next question from Timo. About the first idea, understanding that it's a provocative idea. Have you seen great agile teams without product owners or without scrum masters? Thank you, great talk.
Thank you. Sort of. A product, I would say, a project I worked on recently. We actually did not have a product. Well, we did have a product owner. It was a little bit of a complex situation. They were very far away from us, so we didn't really have much interaction with them, unfortunately. They were on a different continent. But we understood the problem really well, and we were given complete autonomy on how we solved the problem. And it worked out really well, yeah? It's really hard to do because the team does need to understand not just the problem and the context, they need to understand all of the constraints, right? It's very easy to miss constraints, but I have seen it work. I think it requires a really mature team who understands the problem, who understands the impact of what they're doing. But yeah, short answer, yes, I have seen it, but it's hard.
Right. Yara or Jara is asking, how will you streamline the conversations and avoid time wasted by everyone reaching out to customers all the time if there's no PO in the team?
Yeah, no, that's super hard. I don't have an answer to that. So this is why I think a PO is useful. I think a PO does serve a useful function in the team. Having a single point of contact can reduce the overhead. It can reduce the noise. There isn't really another. It's going to be harder. It's going to make some things harder. It's going to make some things slower and more difficult. That's why it's a bad idea. That's why you probably should keep your PO, to be honest. But you should also invest in understanding the user as much as possible. So the previous project I worked on, where we sort of didn't have a PO, was kind of an interesting case where we as the team had a really, really good insight into the thing we were building. It was, I can't go into too much detail. It's sort of a complicated story. I'm not sure how much I can talk about, but we were in kind of a unique perspective in that we understood the problem maybe better than anyone, because we were sort of our own users. We were sort of our own stakeholders in a way. It was really kind of a complicated case, but yeah, it will make some things harder. It will. No easy answers here, unfortunately.
Frank is giving you compliments for your shirt, by the way.
And I like it too.
Last question from Tilo again. So do you have benchmarks for critical code, and how do you store benchmark results between successive pipeline runs so that on each commit merge you can visually see what % the current code is now faster or slower?
Wow. That is a complicated question.
That was a long question as well.
No, it's a good question. I love difficult questions. Thank you. No, I don't. Is the short answer. Something I've done in the past is very, very simple kind of fitness function style tests. If you've read the Evolutionary Architectures book, which I highly recommend, it's a good book. It looks at ways of evaluating code. Ways of evaluating your architecture, and some of the fitness functions it talks about are exactly this kind of thing. How do we judge the fitness, not the correctness, not the perfectness of the code, but the fitness of it for our needs? It's not something I've done a huge amount of work with myself. I've done some fitness function style load tests, but I would really look into, I think it's Arch Unit is something that might be interesting to you. But yeah, read the Evolutionary Architectures book by Rebecca Parsons and Neil Ford et al. Highly recommended.
All right, thanks, Steve. So there's no upcoming question, I think. People say thank you. Wonderful approach. Maybe we can give it one more minute. Now you can type in your question if you have one last question, maybe. Otherwise, maybe if you have some last words.
Cool, yeah. Thanks for coming, everyone. I do appreciate it. Thanks in particular, as I said, to all the people with your cameras on. Your feedback is really useful. I'm barely looking at my slides. I'm looking at your faces because I need that feedback. I find it really awkward talking without faces, so do appreciate it.
One last question popped in. We have one more minute, right? How do you differentiate E2E from contract tests?
So I actually have another slide deck where I talk about all the different types of testing, and there is a slide in it where I say everyone has slightly different definitions and words are basically meaningless, and no one has ever agreed on the same definition of two types of tests. Probably there's an overlap. Generally speaking, with end-to-end tests, I would be thinking about things in terms of kind of an end-to-end user journey, right? So can someone get value from this product is generally the kind of question I'm trying to answer with an end-to-end test. whereas a contract test is asking, does this interface respond in the way I expect it to? Now, they both may or probably work with a running system, so that's where they have some overlap. You could potentially do contract tests on some integration environment or an integrated or in a simpler way without a fully running environment. Obviously, it depends, but yeah.
Great. So thanks everyone for joining, I would say. Have a nice evening, everyone. And keep an eye on our meetup groups. We have some very cool upcoming events in the next weeks. And I'm pretty sure Steve will be on our virtual stage again, maybe this year, maybe beginning of next year. Let's see.
I am working on more talks, yes.
Good evening, everyone, and see you next time.